Alright, we've been talking about foods that's high on the glycemic index, foods that spike your blood sugar, make you pack on the pounds, and give you diabetes. But let's talk about what we could replace those foods with. Alright, so the first thing we're going to start with is the sugar, sweets, and we can replace cane sugar with date syrup. Alright, got some date syrup here. Ingredients, organic date syrup. So this one is 100% from Trader Joe's, made from 100% deglet nor dates with nothing added. Alright, substitute number one. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is pure agave nectar. So pure agave nectar is made from the agave plant. It's the same thing that tequila is made from, and it's become more readily available recently. And Dr. Sebi talked about this as being an alkaline alternative sweetener. Right? So these first two are alkaline. They're on Dr. Sebi's list. He recommends them. Now, those are the only two that are on his list. Those are the only two that he would recommend. But I think there's some other ones that are possible as transitional foods that you could use. And the first one I'll mention, something that used to be on Dr. Sebi's list, is maple syrup. Dr. Sebi used to recommend grade B maple syrup. Now, he doesn't recommend this anymore. I think it has to do with the process that they use to extract the maple syrup. And I don't know why he recommended only grade B, but he doesn't anymore. But I think it's a decent alternative sweetener to sugar. This happens to be grade A maple syrup. But yeah. And the next one I would say is a local honey. If you have a local bee farmer, I would say that's the best place to go to get this honey, because you're gonna get a higher quality honey rather than just going to the supermarket and buying any generic honey, because an independent bee farmer is just more likely to have more integrity and higher quality honey. It's more likely to, use good practices in producing the honey, right? And also, if you suffer from allergies, from pollen, I think it's a good idea to get some local honey that's made from, the bees are using the same flowers that are in your neighborhood, that are giving you these allergies and making the honey. The honey won't give you these allergies. And we all know that honey is a good immunity booster, and that should boost your immunity to these allergies. Alright? So I would say a local honey, if there's a local honey producer in your neighborhood, in your town, at a farmer's market or something like that. You might even be able to find it in your supermarket, in the honey section, if they have a local honey section in your supermarket. And those would be some good alternative sweeteners as opposed to cane sugar. And of course, these would be better than using these artificial sweeteners. These artificial sweeteners almost always have carcinogenic properties. So avoid those two. Anytime I see a product that says no sugar, I'm skeptical. I read the ingredients, and it has something like aspartame or sucralose, one of those artificial sweeteners, which studies have shown it to be carcinogenic. Alright, so the next food alternatives I want to talk about are your grains. So we talked about refined grains that spike your blood sugar quickly and leave you crashing and leave you hungry. So let's talk about some alternatives. So starting with wheat. So we got some good alternatives there that we can find on Dr. Sadie's list that are similar to wheat. We'll start with Spelt. Alright, so we got some Spelt flour here. And Spelt flour is becoming more and more common now. You can find this almost any supermarket now, if not the health food store. Spelt flour is an ancient grain. So all of these grains I'm going to talk about are ancient grains. Spelt flour is a good one. Alright, it's very nutritious, it's very filling. It's not going to spike your blood sugar. And these grains are also complete proteins. So Spelt actually is very similar to wheat. You can make it like, you can use it like you use a wheat bread. It's not going to replace your all-purpose, that white, flour, but it's more like a whole grain flour. It does have gluten, so it has that stretchiness. It has its own unique smell, and I personally like to use Spelt to make my flatbread, and it comes out very nice. Alright, the first one is Spelt. The next one, that's also similar, it's also in the wheat family, because Spelt is actually a type of wheat. The next one that's also in the wheat family is Kamut flour. I don't have any on hand, but I've used it before, and it's also very nice. Kamut flour, K-A-M-U-T. It's also called Khorasan, K-H-O-R-A-S-A-N, I believe. Khorasan wheat, Khorasan flour, also a nice flour. It's also in the wheat family. It's a type of wheat. It's an ancient grain. It's not going to spike your blood sugar. I find this to be a little bit less heavy on your stomach, but it's also still very filling. I find it have a little bit of different texture than the Spelt. I find it have more of a buttery flavor than the Spelt. But either one of these, Spelt or Kamut, if you use these, you make some bread with it. No one's going to really be able to tell that you're not using a typical wheat flour. So these are really good replacements to wheat that are not going to spike your blood sugar. They also have the gluten, so if you want to work it like a dough with that stretchiness, like how those guys flip the pizza over top of their head, this would also work. There's a couple more that are in the wheat family. The one I've tried is another ancient grain called Einkorn. Einkorn is a very ancient grain used by the ancient Middle Eastern people. I think it's like the first domesticated form of wheat. Einkorn, E-I-N-K-O-R-N. And I've only used this like once because it's not that available. I've seen it in my local Publix. It's quite expensive, and I was able to get it back one time and use it once just to try it out. And I found something online said that you shouldn't work this dough too much because you wear out the gluten. But I was still able to make, stuff with it, make a flatbread with it. And this is also like probably the most ancient form of wheat that you can find, with the exception of the next one I'm going to mention. I can't remember the taste very well, but it's going to taste like wheat. So that one is Einkorn. So you can maybe find, I've seen it in Publix, but it's like $10 for a small little bag. So I think Spelt would probably be the best so far and the easiest to find. Replacement to like regular, like plain wheat flour. And the last one is Emmer. So Emmer is also another extremely ancient grain that was used in the middle, I forget what countries used it. I think Egypt or, but this is another ancient grain. I never tried it before. It's also in the wheat family, an ancient form of wheat. It's not going to spike your blood sugar, wheat protein, and it's in there. Emmer, E-M-M-E-R. So those are the wheat. Those are the ones in the wheat family. Let's talk about some other ones. There's also rye flour. So that's a little bit different from wheat, but it's also similar grain. So on Dr. Sadie's list, rye is a bit different. It doesn't have the gluten, so it doesn't have that stretchiness that you're going to find with the Spelt or the Kamut flour. But it's also not going to spike your blood sugar. You might be able to go out and find a nice rye bread, but don't go out and buy like a generic rye bread, because pure ones are hard to find. You'll find a bread that says rye bread, and then the first ingredient's wheat, and then rye is like on the third line. That's not rye bread. That's a normal wheat bread with rye in it, because it doesn't have the soft, fluffy texture as a bread. You'll find some of these rye breads, these German rye breads that are made of like compressed grains, compressed rye grains, and sometimes they'll add barley or wheat flour or some other kind of flour to stick it all together, and it's a much different from what you're used to as having in bread. But so this one's a bit, something that you got to get used to if you want to try it. There's one more flour that I like to use, which you guys have seen me use if you watch me, which is the chickpea flour, also known as besan, also known as gram flour. Alright, so that comes from chickpeas, since chickpeas is on Dr. Sadie's list as well. Many of you know, many of you have eaten chickpeas, some of you don't like it. It's got this dryness, but it's not going to spike your blood sugar. It's really filling, so it's not like, eating one of these white flour breads, which spikes your blood sugar and then leaves you crashing a couple hours later. It's really filling, and I do a lot with this flour. I'm still learning different things that I can make with it. I make crackers with it. I make these pancakes with it, savory pancakes with it. I make a flatbread with it. So then we got chickpeas, which I don't know if you consider that a grain. It's actually a legume. But it's something that you can use. You might not like chickpeas, but it's a good alternative. It could be a good alternative to potatoes. Potatoes are high on the glycemic index. They're going to spike your blood sugar. I don't think there's anything you can do about that. Even if you use, Dr. Sadie once recommended, if you're going to eat the potatoes, he recommends you to eat the red potato. Run with the red skin. These kind of potatoes. These are more close to the indigenous potatoes that came from South America. However, the last time I had red potatoes, I found myself burning and crashing after a few hours. I found myself feeling super hungry. It wasn't like how I feel like when I eat chickpeas. So I'm on the fence about the red potato. I'll eat it sometimes sparingly, but I think if you have a pre-diabetic condition, skip the red potato, skip all potatoes. You might be able to make a mashed potato with chickpeas. It just takes the preparation. You got to soak the beans, you got to boil them, and then you can possibly mash them into a mash, and then make some kind of a chickpea mash, and eat that over the potatoes, and it's not going to spike your blood sugar. Right? If you're willing to put the work in. Okay, so that's chickpeas. All right, let's look at some of the other grains on Dr. Sadie's list. So first we got amaranth. Amaranth is not my favorite. I've tried it like once. So amaranth is a wild plant, and it's eaten as a green vegetable. It's also used as an ornamental plant. It's eaten in the Caribbean as a green called callaloo. Callaloo is basically a domesticated version of amaranth. Right? They're in the same family, but the amaranth grain is the seed of the amaranth plant. And you can find this probably in your health food store. You boil them down and they kind of stick together. It kind of comes out as a porridge. I'm not a big porridge eater, but if you are, amaranth is an option. While we're on the subject of porridge, for those people who like to eat porridge, one really good grain to eat is teff. Alright? And this is the famous Ethiopian grain called teff. It's called spelled T-E-F-F. It's one of the smallest grains there is. And you have the option, there's a grain and there's also a flour. Right, so if you get the grain, you can make a porridge with it. I've tried it before. Dr. Sadie touted teff as being very nutritious. very high in iron, and I can tell you that this teff grain is very satisfying. If you make a porridge with it and you eat it, it satisfies you for a long time. It's very different from eating oatmeal. Oatmeal, you eat it, and then 2-3 hours later you're starving, you're hungry. So I think it's because it's so high in iron, which is going to be good for you if you have anemia as well. So if you like porridge, you can look for some teff grain. You can sweeten it up with any one of these sweeteners, the date syrup, the agave. You can put some dried fruit in it. You can put some bananas and blueberries in it to sweeten it up a bit. And this is where the famous Ethiopian bread, flatbread injera comes from. It's made from. This one here is one of the really most filling grains on the list that'll just leave you satisfied. You won't be hungry for a long time after eating some teff grain or some teff flour. Next one I'll talk about is quinoa. A lot of people know about quinoa now. It's become quite popular recently, and this comes in 3 different colors, and they're all different. So you got the white, you got the red, and you got the black. I'm not really a big fan of the black because of the texture. Has a little bit of a grittiness. But you also have the tri-colored quinoa, which they sell, a mix of all 3 colors. And I like this one, actually. I like using the tri-color ones. I was skeptical at first. But when I tried it, I liked it. So the difference is, I find that the white quinoa is fluffier in texture. Although it might have a bit of a strange aftertaste for some people. I find that the red quinoa has a nuttier flavor. I like the flavor better. It's not as fluffy in texture as the white quinoa, but it has a nice nutty flavor. The tricolor quinoa, since it has a lot of white quinoa in it, it comes out fluffy. And this is a good replacement to rice because it cooks faster than rice. And if you're a fan of rice, this is better than eating white rice because it's not going to spike your blood sugar, and it's a grain like rice, but it cooks much faster than rice. It only takes about 15 minutes to cook quinoa, and all you need to do is get 1 cup of quinoa, 1 cup of water. A 1-to-1 ratio works perfect for the red quinoa. If you're going to do the white quinoa, I would say 1 cup of white quinoa to 2 cups of water. A 1-to-2 ratio, and I will use the same ratio for the tricolor. Right? Oh, so I mentioned rice, quinoa being a replacement to rice. We'll talk about some replacements to rice. And the first one I saw on Dr. Sadie's list is wild rice. Wild rice isn't really in the rice family at all. It's not a type of rice. It just looks like rice. It's a long grain, black colored grain, really long grains. It's not in the rice family. It doesn't even grow in the same climate. It actually grows in the temperate region, in colder regions in North America and Canada, by lakes. Dr. Sadie also touted the wild rice as being very high in iron, and very nutritious, and I would say it's also very filling. Wild rice has its own unique nutty flavor and aroma. It takes quite some time to cook it. It takes 40 minutes to an hour to cook this stuff, to boil it down, to get it to be soft enough to eat. Once it's ready to eat, the black grains kind of split, and there's like a white flesh inside. And then there's also this nice, really nice smell to it. It's got this nutty smell to it. Not everyone's going to like it, I know that, but I think it makes a really good replacement to rice. With one exception, it's quite expensive and hard to find, but I've used it. I don't use it very often, but I've used it before. You can make a nice pilaf with it, or just use it as a side dish, as a grain, and it's quite filling. So it's not something that you need to eat every day. It's not going to spike your blood sugar at all. this is a natural rice. This is a natural grain, very good grain. While we're on the subject of rice replacements, these are some that are not on Dr. Sebi's list. And obviously the first one is brown rice. Right, so this is going to be a replacement to white rice. Very obvious one. Because white rice has the hull stripped off, and so you're losing the fiber, so that's why it's delivering so much starch to you. So with the brown rice, you're getting that fiber, so you don't get the starch delivered to you as quickly. And the next one is black rice. So this is something that they use in Eastern Asia. Black rice, sometimes called purple rice. If you don't know about it, you'll have to go to your Asian supermarket to find this. And it's not the same as wild rice. Wild rice is a long grain. And black rice is actually a type of rice. Usually I see it in a short grain. I've tried this, and it's much easier on your stomach. It doesn't leave you bloated like the white rice. It's even probably better on your stomach than the brown rice. This used to be called the forbidden rice in ancient China, because everyone was forbidden to eat it except for the emperor. This rice has a very dark black color. When you wash it, the water turns black or purplish. I think from what I understand, this rice used to be on Dr. Sebi's list, but it was long removed. He doesn't recommend this rice anymore, but I would say it's a decent transitional food if you're trying to transition from these foods that are high in the glycemic index that spike your blood sugar. So brown rice, and you also have black rice. We have one more that I've never tried that's on Dr. Sebi's list as well, that he would highly recommend, but it's probably very hard to find except for in your health food store, and that's Fonio. Fonio. So I've never tried Fonio, but it is highly recommended by Dr. Sebi. And what Fonio is the seed of a wild grass. And this is used by the Dogon tribe in Mali as a staple grain. So there are some grains that you can use if you want to transition away from grains that are high on the glycemic index and spike your blood sugar and make you gain weight. Those are some grains that you can use that will be much more beneficial to you, and you'll effortlessly start to lose weight if that's what you want to do.